It is my pleasure to introduce to you this evening our speaker, the Reverend Errol Carrim. Now, Reverend Carrim is no stranger to God's anatomy for marriage. In fact, with Reverend Ruth, he's the glue that keeps this together. Reverend Carrim joins us from South Africa. So, you know, for him, this is a major ministry of love. So he is with us this morning for him, and he's going to be speaking with us.
Thank you, and it's good to be here. And wow, yeah, what an opportunity for those of you who are present with us on the platform. Those of you who've been with us, many times before, but to come here and allow God to continue to strengthen and guide and shape you, your life together, your marriage, and I am aware that for a lot of us, marriage is probably in a difficult place, or there's some challenges that you need to work through. And I will encourage you, long after these sessions are over, I want you to go back and listen to what Sister Paul said last night, because it is so foundational. And with 63 years of being on the journey, and full disclosure here, I have been on the journey for 36 years, and I'm not coming to you tonight as someone who have done all this research and I'm going to tell you all this stuff, and that is part of it because it's part of who I am. But I'm coming to you as well with my own marital issues and struggles that I have been through on the journey, and God has, helped me and redeemed me and showed me the way. So just know that my sharing tonight is not just information I want to give to you. It's out of my journey as well, and out of many years of ministry to couples and singles and people around family and marriage and stuff. So it's all put together. As we talk about restoring the foundation, I just want to kind of start us back there, in terms of marriage and where it came from and how it came together, and then take us through the journey of what we need to do to restore the foundation. For anything that we're building, the foundation is essential. If it's a house, the foundation has to be good. If it's a business, whatever it is, we need a solid foundation. Same is true for marriage. We need a solid foundation on which we are building. And so we need to look at the foundation of marriage and then look at our own marriage where it is today and ask ourselves, in terms of the foundation, am I on a solid foundation? Excuse me. Do I need to make some adjustments so that I could be on the solid foundation? Okay. Just in terms of the question of purpose of marriage, we could do a whole nother session on that, unpack it for you, but I just want to get you to understand some things here. When you look at marriage as an institution, we talk about it, as back into Genesis chapter 2. But what you need to notice, and what I want you to notice about marriage when we read Genesis chapter 2, when marriage was instituted by God in the garden, there's a number of things we need to pay attention to. So at the end of chapter 2 of Genesis, I'm reading from the NIV. That is why a man, verse 24, that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife. That is why. Why is the why there? Why? Or this is the reason, some other version would say. A man will leave his father and mother. So there's got to be something God is saying before he makes this declaration, okay, of institutional marriage. And so here's the thing. When we go back and see God's interaction with Adam, there are a number of things that comes up very clearly as to why God instituted marriage. One is God would come and be with Adam in the cool of the day, and what you know, and I was thinking about that even this morning as I was going over my presentation. God would come and fellowship with Adam a part of the day, but then the rest of the day, Adam was left to take care of things. And so that friendship that God developed with Adam, God realized when he's not there, Adam is on his own. So God created Eve to be with Adam for one, for friendship. Your spouse should be your best friend. You shouldn't have no best friend after you got married that is your best friend. Your best friend is your spouse. Okay? So again, this is not the core of my presentation. I'm just wanting to highlight uh, how we understand the purpose of marriage. So that's one thing. The second thing is God looked at Adam and in the earlier thing, then he says um, he needed a helper. God created a helper. And God created Eve out of the rib, the sides. You need to understand this as well. Adam was always in charge before Eve came along. She was created out of his side to become his helper. She wasn't put behind him. She wasn't under him. She wasn't above him. She wasn't in front of him. She was next to him, side by side, to be his helper. He is still responsible. When we look at the fall, God, you read Genesis, God never, up to the end of chapter 2, God does not have a conversation with Eve ever about what is the responsibility of living in that garden. All that was Adam's responsibility. Adam is the one that was left with the charge to pass on and take leadership and lead his wife along God's instructions. Of course, he failed. And so here we are. So that helper is important. But the other thing we got to realize is God created Adam marriage for procreation. God said to go and be fruitful and multiply. Okay, but in the context of marriage. So again, so we see friendship, we see helper, we see procreation. But the fourth thing, and then we'll move on to the foundation presentation. But the fourth thing we see is God created Adam and Eve in terms of for sexual relationship. At the end of the chapter 2, verse 23, it says, Adam and his wife were both naked and they felt no shame. Nakedness together, sexual relationship, fulfilling God's purpose for them, and there was no shame. What I want us to keep in mind here, the institution of marriage, God designed and created before the fall. So I saw some comments on the chat about people talking about procreation, and someone says, "What happened when we're struggling to have children?" So I want to say this to you: just remember, God did create for procreation to have a family, okay, be fruitful and multiply, but sin came after God's institution of marriage. So what we're living in now is the effects of sin that affects the ability for procreation in some cases. But don't miss the point. The procreation is not the point. The point is still marriage is the institution of God to honor God, to bring praise to God, to live it out for God. So whether we are capable, and for my wife and I, it was 13 years before our daughter Kimberly was born. But in those years, after being married, yeah, procreation was a challenge for us. But you know what? It never became a distraction that we put it before God. The need to have children must not must not supersede your commitment to trust God and honor God and serve God and know that God, He knows, He understands, He knows the consequence of sin in our lives. But God must always remain the primary focus of our relationship. And we'll talk about some of that in terms of restoring the foundation. But the whole procreation thing, don't be overwhelmed by not being able to have children and think that I remember when I went to the we were going to the doctors and all of that. And I was in Trinidad. I went to see this doctor, and he said to me, he says, really, you're the one with the problem. And then he said to me, well, um, don't go and kill yourself. And he was serious because that's how desperate people get. And I came out of that thinking, why would I want to kill myself? Because I was struggling to have a child. I am serving God and I trust my God. Marriage was created before the fall. The struggle with procreation is happening, after the fall. But God is working in all of that to bring honor and glory to his name. Okay? All right. So I hope I was able to kind of set a context for us as we try to build on rebuilding the foundation, restoring the foundation. So restoring the foundation of your marriage. When a marriage is having problems, it always goes back to the foundation. Always. Okay? And we'll see that tonight. When you're challenged, look at the foundation. What am I missing? What is happening? What is so different? So we're talking about how do we go back to the foundation? How do we go back to what God intended for us and build on that is where we are going with the conversation this morning. So I want to begin with what it's not, and feel free to ask your question, but I want to just start by saying what it's not. Okay? The foundation of your marriage is not your spouse. This is a common mistake many couples make. Okay? You can't build something that will last on two people who are broken. Remember, I already said to you at the opening there, the institution of marriage was created before the fall to be lived out as God designed it. But when the fall came, it disrupted everything in terms of God designed for marriage, but it didn't change what God requires in the marriage. But when we focus on our spouse, as I love my wife, I love my husband. If my husband behave this way, then I behave that way. My husband treat me this way, my wife treats me this way, so I treat her that way. And we are going back and forth on each other. Okay? That is never a good thing. Never a good thing. So after a while, we just get fed up with each other. And this one is not doing what I like. That one is doing what I like. And so the frustration of your spouse not being the person you want your spouse to be, or think your spouse should be, not recognizing you is not being the person you should be and the spouse you should be. The marriage gets stressed. And when you started out, it wasn't like this. It was all starry-eyed and love, and we could make it, and we can handle any situation. When you get into it and you start facing the challenges and you start living together in the midst of the storm, back to Acts chapter 27, things change. So your foundation can't be your spouse. Your spouse is broken and you are broken. Okay? I know some of us feel we are so spiritual that we are not broken. I got bad news for you. As long as we're this side of heaven, we will always wrestle with brokenness. As Jesus heals us, there is more to be healed until we get to the other side. Okay? So let me back up. I meant to say this at the beginning, so I want to say it here. As you're listening to this presentation, I want you to know this is about you. This is about you and what you need to do. Okay? So I want to challenge you to kind of just, if you are able to mentally even not focus on what your spouse needs to do, but focus on you. This is you restoring the foundation of your marriage. Okay? And as you do that, you could build your marriage. Okay? So the first one is not your spouse. Secondly, love for each other. Love is so much an emotional thing for us that it is hard to sustain over a long period of time when the feeling is not present. We all about this love thing, and we feel good and all of that. And then over the years, all that seem to kind of, the emotion that goes with that. So it can't be love for each other, because that too, at times, so your love, it is trying to think of his name right now. Viktor Frankl is the one who says, your love wouldn't sustain your marriage, but your marriage would sustain your love. Okay? It is the other way around. So there are days when what you feel and how you're feeling because of your own brokenness, you and your spouse are not in a good place. So it's not going to be able to sustain it. It's not going to be able to hold it together for you. It's important. It's important, but it can't be what you are counting on to hold your marriage together, because you would realize that many of you realized, and those of you who are engaged and on here, just giving you a heads up here, that feeling you're having right now, that excitement you're having right now, that's going to change. That's just human. It's going to change. There's got to be something bigger, 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 much bigger than that to hold your marriage together. Not your spouse, not your love for each other. The foundation of your marriage is not your children. They eventually leave. I talk to so many couples, and sometimes just one part of the couple, and you will hear the only reason, and that sometimes they're not even aware of it. It's only when I begin to push the conversation to realize the only reason I'm in this marriage is because of my children. As if the children doesn't even realize that. It's after, when your children are adult, they're telling you, or when the children struggling with their own issues, they're telling you what kind of model they saw for marriage in their family and how the dad was and how the mom was, as though we expect kids not to pick up on the fact that the only reason this marriage is together is because of them. I don't want my child to be affected. I will stay in this, and my child will, not have to deal with a broken home. The home is broken as you are two together anyway. And your child and your children is experiencing the brokenness if the only reason you're in that marriage is because of the children. Okay? So it can't be a spouse. It can't be a love for each other. It can't be those children or that child. Okay? Or wanting the child. You know, we talked about the struggle of not having and being able to have children. Sometimes you are in there because you're desperately trying, and in the meantime, it's weighing down on the marriage. And a lot of couples don't survive the childlessness in the marriage because um, they have so much pain and so much struggle that they decide it's better to go separate ways. Okay, so it can't be that. Neither can it be money, material things. They're temporary, and you can never get enough. No matter how much money people have, no matter how much material things they have, there's always need for more. And there's so many people who are in marriages because of the lucrative job that the spouse has and the life they're able to live. They can't imagine not driving a certain kind of car or living in a certain kind of way or having money to do certain things or go, hanging out in a certain crowd. They can't imagine life without that. So they are in a relationship, in a marital relationship that has no other connection but the material and the monetary benefits that it brings. And that goes both sides. Sometimes the wife has a lucrative job, and he gets to go places and do things that he live in a lifestyle that he can't sacrifice now. Same thing for her. Can't sacrifice that lifestyle now. So we stay in this because of the material and the monetary benefits. Let's understand the foundation. Okay? The foundation of marriage in the Bible is that it's a covenant. And so many times in the Old Testament, especially, God refers to his relationship to the children of Israel as a marriage. Okay. And a covenant, I'll just give you a brief, um, definition here for it. So you could just kind of get what I'm saying there. A covenant. And you remember with Abraham and God, when God was made his promise to Abraham, and God sacrifice Abraham had to bring the dove and and put it there and wait for God present, and he fell asleep. Uh, Covenant in the ancient time was done like this. It was the lesser person, the person who has the less power, okay, would make a commitment to the one who had the greater power to say, if I don't keep my commitment, then may it be done to me as it's done to this animal. May I be cut in half. May I pay with my life, in other words. Okay. what happened in Abraham's case, while that was supposed to happen, where the lesser was saying this, it is, and the lesser would walk through between the animals that is cut in half on both sides as making his commitment or her commitment to the covenant. What happened in Abraham's case, it is God who comes and his presence moves through, the animal that was cut in half to say he is committed to Abraham to keep the promise. This was all new in the ancient Near East of how God showed up to make his covenant to Abraham. Here's the thing about the covenant. The thing about the covenant is it's not a contract. It is not in a contract. If you don't fulfill your part, you can leave. In a covenant, it says whether you fulfill your part or not, I'm going to fulfill mine. That was God was saying to Abraham. Whether you stay faithful to me or not, this covenant promise I have made to you will always be kept. Marriage is a covenant. And what you commit to your spouse, you deliver to your spouse, regardless of whether your spouse is delivering or not. So that those who would say marriage is 50-50, marriage is 100-100. I say marriage is 0 to 100. What I say is whether your spouse is giving 0, you give 100 because you are in a covenant that you made in the presence of God. God blessed and witnessed your marriage. And so you have an obligation to fulfill your part of the covenant as it honors God. Okay? And I know for some of you, this is a little bit difficult to even take in right now because of probably where you are in the marriage and how you feel at the moment towards your spouse. But what I'm saying to you is the foundation of marriage in the Bible is that it's a covenant that we make before God, that God blesses, and that we are committed to keep to God even before it is to our spouse. Okay? God ordained it by creation, as we already see in Genesis chapter 2. And he joined one man and one woman into lifelong flesh and union. Okay. With all of the things that we read and all of the stories we see in the Bible and all of the many wives, all of those things happen along the way because of man's brokenness, not God's desire and doing for humankind. Okay. So, what God's intention at the end of chapter 2 of Genesis, what God's intention is today is still for one man and one woman to be joined into a lifelong one flesh union. That the whole idea of divorce is not the conversation. Is we are in a lifelong commitment. And my wife and I, when we were dating, we laid out certain guidelines for the future of our marriage. And one of the things we said was, no matter what happens, divorce will never be an option on the table because our two, and so to this day, we still live by the saying that says, it's either you trust God or you don't. And if you do, then commitment, for better or for worse, for understanding his part. What does better or for worse means? It means worse. Think of your situation today in your marriage. What is the worst thing could happen in your marriage? And then take a step back and recognize I am in a covenant with God, that God blessed and ordained this marriage. The worst we can get through because God is the foundation, not my love for my spouse, not how my spouse is behaving, not the children, not the monetary stuff, but it is a lifelong one flesh union that reflects God's faithful love and Christ's relationship to the church. We move from seeing God talking about his relationship to Israel as a wife and a husband and all of the adultery and all of that language reflecting the marriage, but into the New Testament where it becomes over in Ephesians where Paul is talking about it, it becomes this relationship where Christ identified, Paul identified the marriage as this relationship with Christ and the church. Still, it is meant to reflect God's presence. It is meant to reflect God um, in the world, in the way we live out our marriages. It reflects the relationship with God. So the foundation then of the marriage, as I want you to come back to now, it's a recognition that my marriage that I've entered in a covenant relationship with my God who ordained this at creation to be joined together to my spouse. And this marriage ought to reflect God's faithfulness and love and Christ's relationship to the church. So what I am challenging you to think about now and to do is to see that the foundation of your marriage has everything to do with what God wants from you in this covenant relationship that you have with God and with your spouse. Marriage is God's creative design, something designed, um, something not God designed, not something designed by society. God created humanity, male and female, in his image and blessed them with the mandate to be fruitful and multiply, rooting marriage in creation. Okay? So just to be clear, there are all kind of institution that was created by society in order for society to function in a healthy way. But when it comes to marriage, it's the one institution that it is God created and God ordained. So what that means is how we live that out must reflect the one who created it and the one who designed it for the purpose for which he designed it. So it is challenging for us to try to live out something that was created before the fall in the midst of the fall. But the good thing is, the one who created before the fall is very present with us after the fall to help us to live as best we can what he designed for us before the fall. So he didn't just leave us to figure it out on our own. He has entered into this world in all of its fallenness through, through Jesus Christ and his death on the cross and now the presence of the Holy Spirit. There is nothing that could take place in your marriage if it's on the right foundation that you can't get through, you can't manage. Financial struggle, in-laws interference, struggling to have children, um, extramarital affair, you name it. There is nothing that can happen in your marriage that if it's built on the foundation of the one who designed it and the one who instituted it, you cannot get through. Because God came into this world to help us to live lives that will bring honor and glory to him. Someone once said that maybe the purpose of your marriage is not to make you happy, but to make you holy. And what that means is if you focus your marriage on the foundation upon which it was created and designed, which is back to God, there's some kind of transformation continues to take place in your life as you seek to honor God in the midst of this marriage with two broken people trying to live out something that was created before brokenness entered into the world. But that's only possible by the presence and the power of God operating in your life. Okay? All right. Let me break down for you then, just quickly, the Genesis 2:24 that we were mentioning there. Leave. It's a new loyalty. Now, that relationship you would have in a healthy context, remember, like I said, it was done before the fall, would be with your parents. Okay? And so when the Bible says you would leave, it means you're leaving the most important relationship that you would have had to this point, which is your parents and your parents raising you. You're leaving that to now create a new relationship, a new loyalty that is distinct from that one. So now this relationship with your spouse become the most important human relationship you would have on earth. Let me repeat that. Your spouse, your relationship to your spouse, that leaving would mean that the relationship with your spouse is the most important human relationship you would have on earth. Not your parents, not your siblings, not your old boyfriend or your old girlfriend, or the guys you hang out with or the ladies you hang out with, your best friend, like I said earlier, friendship, your best friend, your primary relationship should always be your spouse. That means every actions you take, every word you speak, everything you do must be about first and foremost, how is this impact, especially in relating to other people, how is this impacting my spouse? That is your primary relationship. Second thing is, I already mentioned it, you don't leave, but you cleave, the holding fast, the covenantal public binding union. People know that you belong to each other. And it's a public thing, not just the ring on your finger, but the way you behave and the way you speak to each other and the way you treat other people of the opposite sex should clearly define that you have a union. You are cleaving to and holding fast to this one person. And like I said to you earlier, no, it is not just the feeling that will keep this together, but it's the commitment to the cleaving that you make in the covenant with God that says, I will leave and I will cleave. And it says, one flesh. That's the sexual union that comes together. That's the psychological, social, emotional, spiritual expression, that finds its fulfillment in our sexual intimacy as we come together. This is what Genesis 2:24 tells us. This is the foundation of our marriage. This is how we build it. This is what we build on. We focus on God and what God wants for us and how God wants us to live. And that is what's going to continue to hold our marriage together. All of the other things are benefits. All of the other things are great. To feel love and affection and closeness for your spouse all the time. I mean, yeah, after 36 years, I'd love to know how to be going by that feeling all the time, or to have all of the things you need financially and materially, or, to have the best kids, or however you want to put it. All of those things are benefits. They work well when you're on the right foundation. When you're not, then those things have problems, because if they're not working well, then you're ready to quit on the relationship. Leave, cleave, one flesh. This is the foundation of your marriage as God ordained covenant relationship that you stand and commit yourself to before God, before these witnesses, and before each other. Okay?
Mentally be included under one flesh.
Yes. Yes. Totally. In every way. Yes. And I know for some of you, based on where you are, this is a little bit, kind of like maybe even jarring to you, because you've for so long been shaped. And this is what I talk to other couples about. I was talking to a couple who've been married for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and they come together and then to talk to me. And I would begin by saying, are you followers of Jesus Christ? Yes. Are you committed to Christ? Yes. Then I would say, then why are we sitting having a conversation about how your life has been shaped by the brokenness of your spouse in the last 5 years or 10 years, rather than being shaped by Christ? I said, what do you mean? I said, well, look at you. Think of the person you were 10 years ago. What's happening to you today? You've shut down. You're not yourself anymore. You're not even as focused on God as you. And you're telling me because your spouse is doing this and because your spouse is not doing that. And I hear all these conversations about what the spouse is not doing. So I have become this way. So I'm saying, so your shaping has been done by what your spouse is doing or not doing. If Christ is Lord, then it means He is the one that should be shaping you, not the brokenness of your spouse. Okay? So here's where I want to now present to you how you can restore the foundation in your marriage. And as I said earlier, focus on you, not your spouse. Okay? Focus on you. So, restoring the foundation. The first thing, you need to reaffirm your commitment to Christ. This is huge. Some of us in the back of our heads, we tell ourselves we're following Christ, but we're not really committed. We're not really committed. But to stop and make a firm recommitment. Ask God to forgive you for putting him in the back burner, for making your childlessness or your spouse's deception or all of the things that you're carrying that you can't stand anymore, ask him to forgive you because those things have overtaken your life and Christ is only in the background. And you say you're following him, but you're not because what's really shaping you right now is all of the pain and the angst and the resentment you're carrying towards your spouse for whatever reason. And Christ is not the center of your life. So first thing you have to do, reaffirm your commitment. Take your spouse off the throne of your life and put Christ back. Make him your focus. If you're going to restore the foundation, ask him to forgive you for building your marriage and your spouse or the expectations of what it should have been like and what you hope it would have been like. And it's now a disappointment. It didn't come out to be what I hope it would be. If Christ is the center of your life, your marriage would be able to withstand any situation because it is Christ who is guiding you, not you and your feelings and your disappointment in your spouse or what didn't happen to you. So, following that, then, is you have to make time daily to spend time alone with Jesus in Bible reading, in prayer, and meditation. There is no substitute. Okay? Stop and think for a while, just for a moment here. When you first got married, this was part of your life. Before you met your spouse, and when you guys were dating, now, a few years down the road, is this still a fervent part of who you are? Is this still shaping you? Or even this have become less? Or it become a habit? You just do it to say, I spend my time with Christ, but it's not shaping you because I don't, I'm not wanting you to develop a habit of spending time with God. I want you to develop an intentional relation building time to be with Christ because he's the one that's shaping you. So reaffirm your commitment and put back in your life. You say you're busy, I got the kids and I got to go to work and I got to do this and you put Christ in the background and then you can't figure out why things aren't working for you because you're living life based on your feelings and your convenience and how things work out for you. If you want Christ to be the center of your life, you have to make time. And again, God came down and he was with Adam in the cool of the day. So he wasn't with him all day. But if I have to continue to follow that thing, I'm saying God came and he spent time with Adam during part of the day, in the cool of the day. We need to find time to spend time with God in part of our day. But in the rest of our days, we are left to live out the impact of that relationship, that time we spent with God. Okay? There's no compromise, there's no substitute. You need to return to spending time with God so God could influence you to live for him. Take responsibility for your life and restoring the foundation, your thoughts, your actions, and your attitude. Your spouse doesn't make you do anything. You do the things you do out of what's in you. So, would you decide tonight to stop blaming your spouse for any action you take, any thoughts, even if you're in an abusive situation and you decide to leave? It's not your spouse making you leave because they're abusive. You choosing to leave because you want to be safe. Okay? So recognizing, and that's an extreme example I am making there, but my point is take responsibility. How you act, how you think, what's your attitude? It's on you. It's all on you because it's what's in you that's coming out. What your spouse is doing is merely the trigger. Okay? It's merely the trigger. It's in you. So take responsibility for, for you. The problems in the marriage right now, each of you is saying it's the other person's fault. But if you would be honest, you both contribute to it. Have the willingness to see what did I bring here? What did I do or not say in a way that was helpful to build a marriage, but it began to undermine the marriage. Okay, so you are responsible for you. Don't pass anything off to your spouse and say, I wouldn't do this. You made me. You're the reason for. You always cause me to. You know, when you do this, I get this way. Remember, it is you. And the Bible is very clear. You know, in the book of Hebrews, it tells us, uh, in when we stand before God, we have to give an account for this life that we live. Paul reminds us of that as well. That responsibility before God, it's on us. He's not going to ask us about our spouse, about our children, about our boss, about our siblings. He's going to ask us about who we were, how we lived, how we handled what he gave us. That's the accountability. So take responsibility for your life. Don't put it on your spouse. Ask for forgiveness and offer forgiveness. If the foundation is Christ, then this gets difficult for most of us. Because when we get wounded by our spouse, we have trouble forgiving. When we get wounded, period, we have trouble forgiving. And we want justice and we want to be fair and we carry it for a long time. Christ is our model here. This foundation is built on Christ. Christ modeled to us in the midst of being disrespected and treated badly and to the point of death on the cross. He's hanging on the cross in all of the pain, the physical pain of hanging on the cross. He looks down on those who have put him there and says, Father, forgive them. And he wasn't just doing that because he's Christ. Remember, he came on this earth to show us how we can live in obedience to the Father in the flesh. And he showed us a whole new way of living. And so Jesus put forgiveness so high on the relationship level that he says we must love and forgive our enemies. Okay. Your spouse is not your enemy. Your spouse is not your enemy. Your spouse is not out to destroy you and see the end of you. But when we don't forgive, then we build these emotional walls. We keep tacking on these little things that have happened and happened. And then eventually it breaks and you say, I need to leave this marriage, you know, because you are carrying 10 years, 20 years, 5 years of unforgiveness that causes you now to distance emotionally from your spouse. The foundation for our marriage is based on Christ and what God designed it to be. That means ask for forgiveness, take responsibility, but also be willing to forgive. And you're forgiven, not that your spouse gets away with it. You're forgiven so you can be free to live for Christ and to do what he calls you to do. Your spouse have to also answer for their behavior and what they're doing. So don't take responsibility for that. And don't feel if you don't forgive them, they get off the hook or whatever. But if you're going to restore the foundation, forgiveness is a major part of this. You have to let it go because it will imprison you. Your spouse have disappointed you, have done things that you wouldn't believe would have happened. That's true. But when you hold on to it, it destroys you. When people they stop eating and they stop drinking and they stop sleeping and they're destroying themselves physically and emotionally because of something their spouse is doing for your health and for the good of your life and your children, let it go. For being an example, a follower of Jesus Christ, you'll have to forgive. Now, while I'm saying that, it's not as easy as I'm saying it. Some wounds are so deep, it takes time to forgive. But the point is, you have to have the heart and the willingness to say, I need to be free from this. I have to forgive. This is not how God wants me to live. Restoring the foundation requires asking for forgiveness and offering forgiveness. Questions? Comment?
Okay, so there are two in the chat.
Okay.
Going back to the
Yep.
devotions, going back to
Yep.
spending time with God. This person is asking, would this be regardless of having devotion together daily?
Yes, your devotion together daily as a spouse is good because you're building that connectedness together. But your time alone with God is also very important. Okay. Um, because you have to develop that relationship. As that question is asked, let me also say this thought that I need to share here. I have talked to so many couples where I could hear the wife saying over and over again, I'm waiting for my husband to be the spiritual leader of this house, and he's not doing it. And I tell him, come read the Bible, and he's watching TV, and I want to do this. Stop, stop. Your husband, as Paul says, as the Bible says, as we did in Genesis, is, yes, rightly supposed to take the lead in your home. But if your husband is not in the place spiritually, he's not doing it. Sister, don't let that cause you to put your life on hold and your spiritual growth on hold because your husband is not coming to the table to have devotions. You need to have devotions. You need to help your kids because you cannot allow the spiritual life and influence of God upon your home to be taken away by the brokenness of your husband when you know that's a passion and a concern for you. You need to hold up your husband, hold up your home, pursue God with all of your heart for the blessings of God upon your home. Don't just look at him and say, he's not doing it. And so no, you are not doing it. And your home is exposed to all kind of influences because your husband doesn't take the lead. You don't do anything. Please, it's still your home. You step to the plate and you do what it needs to be done to keep your home as a place where God is the head until your husband finds his way. But don't give up on that. Okay?
And thank you so
All
much
right.
for the other one is a comment. Uh,
Okay.
it says probably reaffirming our commitment to each other is needed accordingly, especially in cases of brokenness at times.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I was working with a couple and discovered in it that the husband he told his wife 10 years ago that pornography was no longer a problem and he was fine, all of that. And then uh, she came and she found out, you know, he was watching pornography and all of that. And she was broken, broken, broken. She was like, he had to leave the house for a couple of days. She didn't want to talk to him. I would talk to him and stuff. Long and the short of the story is they walked through it because the foundation is Christ. The foundation is solid. They walked through it. And then they had a vow renewal. They renewed the marriage vows, okay? Just to reinforce this start over, um, a restart of building the marriage in a healthy way. So yes, at time that's necessary in order to remind you to say, okay, let's reaffirm this. A lot of people do it for anniversary celebration, they reaffirm their vows together. So yes, from time to time, I think it's a healthy and a helpful thing for a couple to do. Now, moving on, here's a big one. Commit to living out your marriage based on Genesis 2:24 principles, which I just said to you. Leave, cleave, and two becoming one. Make that your commitment. No other relationship takes precedence over my spouse. None, none, no human relationship. And some of you, you have to ditch some relationship. Okay? Cut them out. They are bad influence to you. You just, and justice, not an easy, I mean, justice is a simpler word because some of you can't even imagine not having this relationship the way you have them. Cut them out for now, rebuild your relationship with your spouse, cling with your spouse, and then you could re-engage, always knowing that nothing will supersede your relationship to your spouse. Okay? Next one, big one. Commit to treating your spouse not as you think they deserve, which, folks, that comes naturally. I don't know about you. It comes naturally. For me to want to treat my wife the way I think she deserves because of what I see her doing. But the challenge for us is, as God would want us to treat our spouses, regardless of what is happening. So to stop and to say, okay, so what do I do when, and again, remember what I said, it's coming from inside of you. So what do I do when my spouse does something that really aggravates me, annoys me? I am annoyed. Okay. Not because my spouse is not making me annoyed. I am annoyed inside of me because of what is happening. My natural reaction is to treat my spouse out of that feeling of annoyance. I think, well, I'll do this. You didn't do this for me. You didn't give me a glass of water when I wanted it, so I'm not going to get you a glass of water when you want one. You forgot my birthday, so I'm not going to remember your birthday. Okay? No. God is your father-in-law. You are married to his child, and he wants you to treat his child in a way that he treats his child. And that's what the parent conversation before you get married, right? What are you going to do with my daughter? What are you going to do with my son? How are you going to take care of them? God is requiring us to treat each other as he wants us to treat each other, not as, you know why? Because we're broken. And because we're broken, we'll always have a justifiable way to think our spouse deserved this because of what they did. But because it is God's institution, we need to treat our spouse the way God would want us to, regardless of what's happening. So if your spouse has betrayed you, and for some people, extramarital affair is not as painful as financial betrayal. That's just where some people's heads are, right? He spent thousands and didn't tell you. That's worse than if he had slept with someone. He slept with someone is worse than. So what I'm saying is different things impact us differently. But here's the point. Regardless of what's happening, you know that God is the one who ordained and blessed your marriage. So honor God in the way you treat them. Okay? Let God be glorified in the way you treat your spouse, regardless of what you think they deserve. Surround yourself with like minded people who are seeking a marriage that honors God. This is big. The friends we keep will determine the life we live. If you are around people who came out of families with broken marriage and their marriage is broken up and they have a very negative view of marriage, and then you're talking and they're your friends, you spend time with them and they're feeding into your head, you are going to have a very negative view of your marriage as well. Get to know people, be in groups, in church, wherever, and join together and help each other. That's what we are as a community, to build a marriage together. Okay? We need to help each other to grow and to build the relationship that God calls us to build. Surround yourself to people. There's a saying, show me the friends you keep and I can tell the kind of person you are. There's a lot of truth to that. Have people in your life who's going to help you to live out a marriage that honors God rather than to be cynical about marriage and talk about how your spouse and, don't talk to people with your spouse. Don't bring your spouse down, you know. Find people who would help you to find ways to build your spouse. Okay, any questions here? Especially that one about
Yes,
how
yes,
you treat
yes,
each other.
there are questions.
Okay, okay.
Um, this one goes back to what you were saying about commit to living out your marriage based on the Genesis 2:24 principles. I
Yeah,
believe that's what that
yeah, okay.
question, but their question was how to conquer this, not treating your spouse the way that
Ah,
you
yes,
think they should be treated based on what they are doing.
yes,
And
yes.
then the other person says, how would you counsel someone who views marriage as a covenant, has consistently practiced forgiveness, and has been praying earnestly for change in their husband or wife, but after many years see no improvement? That person is
Okay,
now growing tired, feeling discouraged, and is beginning to consider leaving the marriage, how should they be guided?
Okay. All right. So the first question, how do you conquer the treating people
Mm,
not how they deserve, but how it honors God? That question a lot with what's going on with you. A person, Jesus says, if this slap you in the right cheek, turn to the left cheek. And if you take your shirt, give in your coat. The point Jesus is making there is recognizing that um, in all our brokenness, we are going to treat each other badly. We're gonna behave in ways. I have to recognize in me what triggers in me the desire for revenge. It comes naturally for us, you know. And I have to bring that before Christ and say, that's not the way I want to be. I want to bring honor to you in the way I treat my spouse. So my treatment of my spouse, I remember I was sitting with a bunch of guys many, many years ago. This is when it came to me. Many years ago, I was sitting with a bunch of married men. We were talking about our marriage and how to treat our spouse. And as clear as day in that conversation, God just said to me, the way you treat your spouse is about bringing honor to my name, not what you think your spouse deserves. And from that day, that has been my motto, my principle, my way of treating my wife in any circumstance, doesn't matter what. Okay, I have to stop and the times when I don't do it, and this has to say, I am sorry to her and sorry to God because I dishonored him in the way I did it. So it has to be. I want God to be honored, not my feelings, not my need for revenge, not I know I've been hurt and I have to work through sometimes you have to work through that hurt. Talk to someone, talk to a godly person who's going to help you work through the hurt, not someone who's going to say, yeah, he shouldn't have done that. And so she shouldn't have done that. So you have a right to do this now. You don't need that kind of counsel. You need counsel who will help you through the pain to come to the light of saying, I want to reflect Christ in this marriage. So that's the answer to that first question. The second question about someone who are living out the covenant, doing everything that's honoring God, but the husband is not changing. Sister, you're not doing all of these things for your husband to change. You are doing all these things to bring honor and glory to God. God hasn't forgiven you. That's what I said earlier. Who is on the throne? Okay. God will help you, but you can't make your husband's unwillingness to change your focus. Okay. How the marriage turns out, what plays out, your obligation is, I am going to honor God. Okay. I have met couples where they want to have a divorce and one spouse would say, I will never do that. Okay. But the other one wants, and the spouse says, that's not going to happen with me because I have made a covenant commitment to God and I'm going to stick with this. So I hear the pain, the emotional frustration, the desire, but your happiness then is not dependent on your spouse changing. Your peace of mind is not dependent on your spouse. Those things come back to, can God help you? Can God meet these needs? Can God fulfill all of the longing in your life? Sure, He can. But it means this person who is your spouse can't be the reason for you doing all these things in hope that they would change. That's not why you're doing it. You're doing it because God is honored and He's praised and He's glorified, and God will bless and keep and strengthen you in the midst of it. So make honoring God the focus is what I would counsel this person. Don't give up on God. We can set a time, and sometime the spouse may never change, but that unchanging spouse should not have caused you to not live a life that was pleasing and honoring to God, and God being able to work in and through you for His glory, for His honor, and for His purpose. That's a mouthful, but that's a response there. This is big, and this is I really think this is where the problem lies in all our marriages. Deal with the emotional wounds in your life that causes you to respond to your spouse in a way that dishonoring to Christ or that dishonors Christ. Okay? Uh, I said earlier, it's what's in us that comes out. And a lot of us, we come into this marriage with baggage from living in broken homes, baggage from seeing, um, even growing up in abusive homes, single home, what marriage is supposed to be, and sexual abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and this has been my experience in all of those places and growing up, and so you see all of those things and you see all of the fighting and all of the things, and you come here with all of that wounds and all of that baggage, and the two of you now trying to build a unit, a family, and but you're just pressing on the pain points. When you raise your voice, suddenly, you know, um, your husband gets mad because you had a domineering mother who would always yell, and so you're not my mother, and he wouldn't say it, but he tells his friend, and all the emotional wounds. You were sexually abused, so now you're struggling sexually in the marriage, and you're blaming your spouse for watching pornography or having an affair, and it's your wounds, it's you, it's not your spouse. Okay, so all of the times when you behave in ways that dishonoring to Christ, check where that's coming from. What's happening outside is merely the trigger. It's the response that you're giving that's the problem. Deal with it. Get help, seek counseling, seek godly advice, fast and pray. Go back to those places. You can't deal with a wound if you say it's not there. You have to find it, acknowledge where it's coming from, and invite Christ to bring healing, in those places in your life that is so broken, that is so damaged because you're living in a fallen world. It's disrupting your marriage. It makes you want to leave. You think you don't like your wife anymore. You don't like your husband anymore. You're connecting to the person in church or the person in the office, and you think there's a better life there. And you get over there. You know what the statistics tells us? Your second marriage, 50% chance of failing. Your third marriage, 70% chance of failing. Your fourth marriage, 100% chance of failing. You know why? Because you know what's the consistency in those four marriages? You. And it's obvious that there's some issues that need to be dealt with. So please, I can't emphasize this enough. This is where the problem lies. Okay? You need to deal with the pain you're carrying that you're projecting on your spouse and saying your spouse is the problem. Yes, we can really do get stuck there. And for many of us, that's where we get stuck. For years, that was me. Everything was wrong with my wife, everything was wrong with my people around me, it was everybody else's problem until I stopped and realized, wait a minute, but it's me. I am the common denominator in all of those relationship problems I'm having. So I need to find out what about me that makes me so angry, so disrespectful, so uncaring, so selfish, so egotistical, so all about me. Where is it coming from? And God, I could tell you, has done a work in me, continues to do the work in me. And I recognizing that, man, I want to break this generational curse. I don't want my daughter to behave the way I have behaved. So I try to raise her differently. But she's going to have her issues as well, which she does. But she has to work with hers in order to find that place as well. How shall we deal with these emotional wounds? For example, if we have been sexually abused. This is huge. Been there, done that, and I work in this area so much with so many people. Um, you have to recognize that first thing is that you need help. That's the first thing you have to recognize. All of the crazy ways in which you have come to understand sex and sexuality came out of that abuse. So what I was saying about sexual abuse is that when it happens in that stage of where those formative years as a girl, or guy, and they become a prostitute as an adult, you say, well, how can you be a prostitute? Well, in our mindset, we think that's difficult to imagine. But if in those formative years, that's the value you passed on, you were abused sexually, you were given money, or you're given treats and say, made you feel good for being treated that way sexually, then as an adult, it carries over as a value. If I sell my body, I get rewarded, and that's my worth. Okay. So there are a lot of fallout from sexual abuse, but how do you deal with those emotional wounds? First thing you have to recognize is I have a problem. Now I need help. Now the depth of the problem will determine the measure of the help. Can I have a conversation with my pastor and pray about it and find a healing? Possibly, because it's not as deep. But sometimes it's so deep, it takes years of working and counseling, and I've been working with a client recently who we've been dealing with some trauma, in that client's life. And so we have to meet weekly, and we have to keep working and working, because I have to help this client to think differently about their abuse and the trauma that they carry. So it depends on the level, the depth of the wound require determine the kind of help you need, how long you need it, and what kind of help you need. So yes, you can be free, you can find healing, you can find help, but the starting point is you must have a desire. That's what I want to do. I want God to heal me from the wounds of my sexual abuse. And there is a lot of help out there for you in the Christian circles to help you deal with it in a godly way. So back to this one. This is big. Folks, you've got to grow your spiritual life, engage in a spiritual discipline. You can't build a covenant marriage the way it honors God if you're not doing the things that helps you to draw closer to and see God more clearly and hear God more clearly and follow God more closely. There's no compromise here. This is an important part of your life. And marriages break down because these things are not part of our personal lives. We're just wanting our spouse to make everything work. And when in truth and in fact, we need this kind of a growth in our personal lives for our marriage to be honoring to God. So here's my conclusion. Matthew 7:24-25 says, anyone who listens to my teaching and follow it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and the floodwaters rise and the wind beats against the house, it won't collapse because it's built on bedrock. Christ is your bedrock. Build your marriage on the solid rock, not on your spouse, not on your love for each other, not on the children, not on the material things you have. Go back to Christ. Build on Him. It'll be solid. It'll be like being out in that storm, as Sister Paul was telling us last night. You may have to throw some things out of the ship because it's getting in the way, you know. But be assured, as Paul said, not you will get through this because the God whom I serve has said to me, the God you serve will take care of you. I promise you. Childless, not serving God, spouse, financial struggle, adultery, you name it. God will get you through if you remain solid on the rock. Build your marriage on the rock, and God will hold you in the midst of the storm. When the floodwater rises, when the trials come, whatever happens, you are guaranteed God will see you through. Okay? Here's what I would suggest for you to do as a couple. Again, if you can do this as a couple, great. If not, if or you're here alone or however, reaffirm your commitment to Christ. Give Him first place. But I don't want it to be a secret. You need to share this decision with someone who could hold you accountable. Even if both of you do it together, you must let someone outside the marriage know. Get some accountability. Start making Christ number one. And number two, create a memorial or reminder of your decision to give Christ first place. If you've decided to turn your marriage around together and you said, this is what we want to do, buy a piece of furniture, put a picture in the house, something to remind you this is the commitment we made, this is what we're going to do. If you're an individual, find something that will remind you that this day forward, my marriage is going to be built on what God requires of me, not what I expect from my spouse. But have something to remind you. So daily you can see it that'll remind you this is where my focus is. So you can build your marriage rather than have your marriage destroyed by what your spouse is not doing. And number three, take responsibility for your part in the problem. Whatever it was, don't belabor it. Don't spend time trying to fix it. Just ask forgiveness, make amends where you possible, and move on. Okay? Let it go. Just make a decision. This, therefore, what has happened? I need to let this go. I want to build my marriage on Christ. And then trust God to do the rest for you. Okay?